Sorry about the short break there. I sometimes need more than 15 minutes to explain myself. Anyway, so that idea of columns and pyramids would later on get translated to the Egyptians, who began obviously to build the pyramids that we are more familiar with. The pyramids in Mesopotamia were more step pyramids, like we've already talked about, ziggurats, but that idea would get translated to the Egyptians, and they would also use the same idea. And again, the Mesopotamians had writing in the form of cuneiform. So the Mesopotamians were really quite brilliant. So briefly, we're going to talk about what happens when Mesopotamia gets invaded. Well, the first invader of Mesopotamia took place about 2350 when Mesopotamia was invaded, and the invasion was by Sargon of Akkad. Okay, so Sargon was what's known as an Akkadian. Akkad was another city-state, and so Sargon would invade Mesopotamia, take over Ur and Sumer. And he would create the very first empire. An empire is when you have several different peoples living under one ruler. Okay, so Sargon was the first emperor. From there, then, right around 2000 BC, we have a group that invades and takes the empire from Sargon's ancestors. Remember, we have dynasties, and that was the Amorites. Okay, and the Amorites were from a city called Amor, but also that city became known as Babylon. And by the way, this is not the first time you're going to hear about Babylon. In fact, Babylon's going to keep coming up over and over again through ancient history because Babylon is a very important place in the world. Now, the most powerful ruler to come out of the Amorites was a guy by the name of Hammurabi. Now, you're going to look at Hammurabi's code here in a little bit, but Hammurabi was a pretty powerful dude, but he was also a unique historical figure because what he did was he created a set of laws. In fact, we call that Hammurabi's code today. And we still have evidence of this. It was written on tablets. It was written on statues. It was written in a lot of places around Mesopotamia because Hammurabi's code was written in such a way that it treated people really for the first time very uniquely. In fact, Hammurabi's code was the very first set of uniform laws in history. Now, what I mean by that is this. First of all, it's one of the very first known sets of written laws. You know, somebody took the time to sit down and write the law down so it could be displayed all over Mesopotamia. Now, but that doesn't necessarily justify the uniform thing. So what I mean when I say it's the very first set of uniform laws is that Hammurabi's code was the first set of laws that applied to everyone equally. Okay, that's what I mean by uniform. Because previous to this, yes, they had laws. Every civilization has to have laws. That's a part of government, which again was one of the key characteristics of civilization. But in other civilizations previous to this, the law was sort of wishy-washy. For example, if you were the king, the law didn't really apply to you. You could kind of do whatever you wanted. If you were let's say, a priest or maybe a very wealthy artisan or craftsman, okay, you also didn't have to worry so much about the law because, well, sure, the laws probably applied to you a little more than it would have if you were the king. It was easier for you to get out of things. I mean, you could get away from the law as well. But if you were like low class, you were the bottom of the rung, ladder, if you will, you could expect the law to apply pretty heavily to you. In fact, if you did something to violate the law, you were often treated pretty harshly. So in the case of Hammurabi's code, though, the law actually applied equally to everyone. So the king couldn't get out of it, the priests couldn't get out of it, the artisans couldn't get out of it, and the low class couldn't get out of it. They applied to everyone equally, and that's why it's a really interesting thing to study historically. So here in a minute, you're going to look at that and see how Hammurabi's code was written. I think you'll appreciate it. So next time, guys, we're going to talk about the Nile, and we're going to talk about the ancient Egyptians and what sort of civilization they had going and what was unique there.